The carriage wheels turned slowly through the fog, their rhythm echoing against the cliffs of Devonshire. A faint glow from a distant window was the only sign of life ahead. Blackwood Manor, a place whispered about in London, drawing rooms like a ghost story. Inside the carriage, Miss Eleanor Marsh pressed gloved fingers to the glass, peering through mist and drizzle. She had been hired as music tutor to the Duke's niece, but every rumour she'd heard told her the same thing. The Duke of Blackwood hates music. The iron gates creaked open, horses snorted in the cold. As she stepped out, the sheer size of the manor dwarfed her, a Gothic sprawl of grey stone and ivy, its many windows dark, its towers clawing at a clouded sky. A single lantern burned above the main door. The butler, tall and severe, greeted her without warmth. "Miss Marsh, His Grace requests you refrain from playing the pianoforte outside of lessons." His voice held a finality that needed no explanation. Inside, the air smelled faintly of dust and salt from the nearby sea. Portraits lined the walls, stern men, graceful women, and at the centre staircase a large painting shrouded in black velvet. The butler noticed her glance and muttered, "Her Grace, the late Duchess Catherine." Then he led her to her quarters and left without another word. That night, Eleanor unpacked her few belongings, the silence of the manor pressing against her ears. No laughter, no music, only the wind against the panes. She wondered why anyone would keep a child in such gloom. From below came the muffled clang of a clock, striking 10, then footsteps, heavy, deliberate. Through the half-open door she caught a glimpse of a man crossing the corridor, tall, broad-shouldered, hair silvered at the temples. He paused, sensing her gaze, then moved on. For an instant she met his eyes, grey as storm water, and something in them felt broken. The next morning brought her first meeting with Lady Clara, the Duke's 8-year-old niece. The girl was bright, lonely, eager to learn. They sat at a small harpsichord in the east parlour, the only room with unshuttered windows. When Eleanor struck the first notes, the servant flinched as though she'd shouted. "Keep it soft," the maid whispered. "His Grace forbids music. Says it stirs ghosts." Despite the warning, lessons went well. Clara laughed for the first time in months, or so the maid said. By afternoon, faint sunlight spilled across the quays, and Eleanor allowed herself to believe the household might forgive a little melody. Then came the moment that changed everything. As Clara packed her sheet music, Eleanor absent-mindedly began to hum, a simple tune her mother had sung when Eleanor was a child. The notes drifted through the open doorway, light and haunting. From the upper landing came the sudden sound of glass shattering. Startled, she stopped. Seconds later the Duke appeared, his face pale, one hand gripping the banister. "Where did you learn that song?" His voice was low, but shook with something between fury and grief. Eleanor rose, confused. It's just an old melody, Your Grace. I've known it since childhood." He stepped closer, eyes locked on hers. "No one in this house is to play that tune, ever." His tone cracked on the last word, and before she could answer, he turned sharply and vanished down the hall. Silence crashed down again. Clara's small voice broke it. "That was Aunt Catherine's song," she whispered. "She wrote it for him. He hasn't let anyone play it since she died." The revelation sent a chill through Eleanor. That night, she lay awake listening to the sea battering the cliffs. Somewhere deep in the manor, a door creaked. Then, faint, uncertain, she heard it. A single note from a piano, played as if by memory alone. One note, then another, the same melody. The Duke was awake, and he was playing the song he had forbidden. Eleanor sat up, heart-pounding. The house, long dead to sound, had just taken its first breath again. For days after that night, Eleanor Marsh could not forget the echo of that fragile melody floating through the manor's cold corridors. The Duke had forbidden it, yet he himself had played it, hesitant, trembling, like a man reaching out to a ghost. She told no one, not even young Lady Clara, whose innocent chatter might have carried the secret to listening ears. Instead, Eleanor carried the sound like a confession. Each note haunted her dreams, weaving with the whisper of the sea and the mournful cry of gulls. When she next saw Duke Alaric Blackwood, it was in the conservatory, a forgotten chamber overtaken by ivy and neglect. He stood among the withered roses, staring at the cracked glass ceiling. "Miss Marsh," he said without turning, "I must remind you again. Music is not permitted beyond the child's lessons." His voice was sharp, but beneath the steel was exhaustion. Eleanor curtsied. "Yes, Your Grace, though forgive me, it seems cruel to forbid something that brings the child light." He turned then, and the faintest shadow of surprise crossed his face. "Light," he murmured. "Do you think there is light left in this place?" "There is," she answered softly. "You've simply closed all the shutters." For a long moment he said nothing. Then, with a movement almost weary, he left her among the dead roses. That night, however, she found a small piece of parchment slipped beneath her door, an old music sheet, creased and faded. At the top was written in a man's careful hand, "Do not let her forget this tune." Eleanor's breath caught. It was the song, Catherine's song. The late Duchess's handwriting was elegant, slanted like the wind over the moors. Someone had kept it hidden all these years. But who had left it for her now? The next morning, she brought it to Clara under the guise of a new lesson. The girl's face lit up. "That's Aunt Catherine's lullaby. Mamma said she used to play it when Uncle Alaric couldn't sleep." Clara pressed a small finger to the notes. She called it The Sea's Lament. Eleanor hesitated. "Would you like to learn it?" Clara nodded eagerly, and though Eleanor's hands trembled, she placed her fingers on the keys and began to play. The melody was slow, mournful yet tender, a song that rose and fell like the tide itself. By the second verse, Eleanor's throat tightened with emotion. Clara's soft voice hummed along, her childlike tone blending perfectly with the music. Then a sound broke through, the deep creak of a door. Eleanor froze. The Duke stood in the doorway, expression unreadable. For a long moment, the only sound was the echo of the final chord, fading into silence. Clara jumped up, all innocence. "Uncle Alaric, we were only—" "It's all right, Clara," the Duke interrupted gently. His gaze never left Eleanor. "You may go to Mrs. Penrose for your reading lesson." When the child left, a thick quiet fell between them. He stepped closer, his boots soft on the rug. "You shouldn't have played that," he said, though his tone lacked the fury of before. "I found the music," Eleanor said quietly, showing him the sheet. "It was left for me." He stared at the faded ink, and for the first time his composure cracked. "I wrote those words on the night Catherine died," he whispered. "She made me promise never to let her song die with her. And yet—" He took a shuddering breath. "I buried it along with her." His eyes met hers then, haunted, hollow, and unbearably human. "Do you believe in ghosts, Miss Marsh?" Eleanor's pulse quickened. "Only the kind we make for ourselves." Something like a faint smile touched his lips. "Then this house is full of them." She saw then not the cold, cruel Duke the world whispered about, but a man hollowed out by love and guilt. The more he tried to silence the music, the louder it sang in the corners of his soul. That night, she dreamed again of the song, only this time she wasn't playing it alone. She felt a hand over hers, guiding her fingers across the keys, warm and trembling. When she turned, it was not Catherine, but Alaric himself, his face close, his voice whispering the same words that had once been written on the page. Do not let her forget this tune. When she awoke, the melody still lingered in the air. But this time she realized it wasn't just Catherine's song anymore, it was theirs. In the weeks that followed, the melody of the sea's lament quietly returned to the manor like sunlight slipping through old shutters. Whenever Eleanor played, the air grew gentler, lighter. The maids hummed while polishing the silver, the steward lingered at doorways longer than necessary, and even the ever-frowning Mrs. Penrose found herself tapping her foot in rhythm. But there was one heart it affected most deeply. Duke Alaric Blackwood's. He no longer forbade the sound. Instead, he lingered at the threshold whenever Eleanor played, hidden in shadow, listening. His rigid posture would soften, his eyes distant, as if the music carried him to another life. It frightened him, and yet he could not stay away. One evening a storm raged over the cliffs, thunder shaking the ancient walls. The household had retired early, but Eleanor, unable to sleep, found herself drawn once more to the piano. She lit a single candle, its flame trembling like her heart, and began to play the Duchess's song. The notes mingled with the storm, weaving sorrow and beauty into the night. When the last chord faded, she heard a voice behind her. "Do you know," Alaric said quietly, "that she composed it here? In this very room?" Eleanor turned. He stood by the window, half lit by lightning. His hair was damp, his coat unbuttoned, a man stripped of pretense. "She said it was the sound of the sea calling her home," he continued. "She played it the night before the carriage accident. I remember, she looked at me and she said, 'If I leave you before dawn, promise you'll listen for me in the waves.'" His voice cracked. "I never understood what she meant until I heard you play." Eleanor's breath caught. "Your Grace, I didn't mean to intrude upon your grief." "You didn't." His eyes met hers, grey as the storm outside. "You brought it back to life." They stood in silence, two souls bound by a song. The thunder rolled away, and for a fleeting moment she thought she saw something unspoken in his gaze, something dangerously close to tenderness, but just as quickly he turned away. "There are things you should not know, Miss Marsh," he murmured. "Some songs are better left unfinished." The next morning she understood what he meant. A sealed letter lay upon the piano, addressed in elegant handwriting, to Miss Eleanor Marsh. Inside was a single line written in the Duke's hand. "Do not play the Duchess's song again." Beneath it, however, another note, older, faintly smudged, had been hidden within the envelope. It was Catherine's handwriting. "If you are reading this, then he has hidden the truth. The accident was no accident. He must forgive himself, or it will destroy him." Eleanor's hands trembled. The Duchess's death had always been whispered about. The broken carriage wheel on the cliff road, the night fog, the Duke's silence afterward. But this suggested something far darker. That evening, she found Alaric in his study, staring into the fire. "You lied to me," she said, her voice trembling, but steady. He looked up sharply. "Careful, Miss Marsh. I found her letter, Catherine's." She stepped closer. "She said the accident wasn't an accident." His expression froze, then hardened. "You had no right to search through my private affairs." "I didn't search," she protested. She left it for you to find peace. Why hide it?" "Because peace is not mine to have," he snapped, rising to his full height. "You think you understand what happened. You know nothing of that night." "Then tell me," Eleanor's voice broke. "Tell me what truth you've buried with her." The Duke's breath came raggedly. For a long moment the only sound was the crackle of the fire. Then he turned away, one hand braced on the mantel. "I was driving the carriage," he whispered. "She begged me not to go to London that night, but I insisted. I was angry, jealous of a man who had written her a letter I never read. The road was slick with rain, the wheel caught on the edge, and she—" His voice broke entirely. "I held her as she died." Eleanor's heart twisted. "It was an accident, Alaric." He shook his head. "No, it was pride. I locked my heart away that night because it killed her once, and I will not let it kill again." As the firelight flickered across his face, Eleanor saw not a cold Duke, but a broken man shackled by guilt. And in that moment she realized that perhaps the song wasn't calling Catherine home. Perhaps it was calling him back to the world of the living. For days after that night, the Duke of Blackwood vanished from Eleanor's sight. His study door remained locked, the servants whispered of his temper, and even the little Lady Clara grew anxious. "He doesn't come to breakfast anymore," the girl confided, her bright eyes dimmed. "He used to read me stories every morning before he stopped smiling." Eleanor's heart ached for them both. She knew that the letter she had found had torn open a wound that had never healed. Yet something inside her whispered that this pain, this reckoning, was the only way to save him. She could not undo the past, but she could help him remember that he still had a future. That night the storm returned. The wind moaned through the chimneys, rain lashed the windows, and the manor seemed alive with ghosts. In her room, Eleanor lit a single candle and stared at the piano across the corridor. The decision she made felt both reckless and inevitable. She would play it, the Sea's Lament, one final time. Not in defiance, but as a prayer. Her fingers trembled as she touched the keys. The melody began softly, a whisper of sorrow that swelled into something vast and aching. Each note spoke what her lips could not: forgiveness, love, and the courage to let go. Down the hall, in his darkened study, Alaric froze. The song drifted through the walls like the breath of a lost soul. For a moment, rage surged. She had disobeyed him again. But as the melody swelled, something inside him cracked open. He rose, almost in a trance, and followed the sound. When he reached the music room, Eleanor was there, her candle flickering beside her, the shadows of the storm dancing on her face. She looked up as he entered, but did not. "Stop playing." Her eyes met his across the room, full of quiet resolve. "Why?" he asked, voice breaking. "Why must you torment me with her song?" Eleanor didn't stop. "Because she left it for you to hear," she said softly, fingers moving across the ivory keys. "Because she loved you enough to forgive you. But you never forgave yourself." Alaric's breath shuddered. "You don't understand." "I understand more than you think," she whispered. "Guilt is a cage, Your Grace. You built it so well that you forgot how to live outside it. But this song, it isn't her curse, it's her gift." The Duke took a hesitant step forward, the thunder rumbling behind him. For the first time, the cold mask on his face began to melt. His eyes glistened. "When she died," he said hoarsely, "I thought the best way to love her was to stop feeling altogether, to bury every part of myself that could be hurt again." "Then let her song remind you that love didn't die that night," Eleanor said, rising to her feet. "It was waiting for someone brave enough to open the door." The storm reached its peak, lightning flashing through the window. The wind snuffed out the candle between them, plunging the room into darkness. But the music continued. Alaric took another step, then another, until he was beside her. His hand covered hers on the piano, guiding the final notes together. The melody trembled, then stilled. When the silence fell, it was not empty. It was full of the things they could not say. "She would have liked you," he whispered finally. Eleanor smiled faintly, tears shining in her eyes. "Then perhaps she's the one who brought me here." He reached for her then, not as a duke, but as a man reclaiming his own heartbeat. The kiss they shared was not born of passion alone, but of grief transformed, love rediscovered in the ruins of sorrow. Outside, the storm began to ease. The first hint of dawn brushed the horizon, and the manor, so long drowned in silence, seemed to breathe again. Later, the servants would say that the Duke's study door was never locked again, and that the piano in the East Hall sang every morning, its melody echoing softly through the corridors. And when Clara's laughter filled the air once more, the ghosts of Blackwood Manor were finally quiet, because the song that once mourned a love lost had become the anthem of a love reborn.